Father Graham, I will have to leave at 1:15.
All right, good, Terry. Thanks for the heads up. I appreciate that. So the first item on the agenda is the roll call. Do we have the roster there? Oh, that's right. I forgot. We do that later, don't we? Well, we'll do it now. So this is the announcement that we've got used to having made at the beginning of these meetings. Please note that in conjunction with Ohio State's revised sunshine laws and the rule limiting the number of people who may meet in a space and who may so meet, CPP has decided to convene the meeting via video conference in accordance with Ohio Public Records and open meeting laws. CPP has advertised the meeting on its website in advance and has provided a link for members of the public to listen and view the meeting. This meeting will be video recorded, and a copy of the meeting minutes, including any documentation, will be made available via the CPP website and on CPP YouTube under the area Board of Directors approved meeting minutes as soon as practically possible after the meeting. Leslie, thanks for that bit of housekeeping. And now for other housekeeping, to go through the roll call. Mike Graham here. Cheryl Rose.
Present.
Thank you. Debbie Alsep. I saw you, Debbie Alsep.
Here.
There you are. Marcia Futel.
I'm here.
Terry England.
Here.
I'm going to come back to Terry in a moment. Anthony Hobson.
Here.
Bishop Tate. Bishop Tate.
I'm here, sir.
Wonderful. Thank you. Gary Lundgren.
Here.
Micah Camaras.
Here.
Bianca Edwards. Bianca. So she may be joining us later. Odell Owens.
Present.
Thank you. Vanessa White. Vanessa. Again, we'll wait for her to come in a bit, I suppose. Laura San Regret.
Here I am.
Thank you. Christine Fisher.
Here.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Sally Westheimer.
Here.
Thank you. I said a moment ago that I'd be coming back to Terry England in a moment, which no doubt made her really suspicious about why I would be doing that. I want to ask her how her retirement is going. I understand that she retired this past Friday, and I understand more that she was inducted into the African American Chamber of Commerce's Black Business Hall of Fame this past Saturday. So I'm sure we all want to give her a thumbs up or show something on our screen, applause or something like that, that congratulates her for it. So good going, Terry. Thanks so much for your incredible service to the community over so many years, being a real leader, path breaker, and so on. And for all your work on behalf of the children of our community. And I hope that you enjoy your retirement as much as you absolutely deserve to, even though somehow I expect that it won't really be a full retirement, that you'll find all kinds of ways to keep busy, or that all kinds of ways to keep busy will find you. Do you want to say anything, Terry?
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone. I want to thank the community, and particularly Greg Lansman and Vanessa White for kind of bringing me into this, because as a small business owner, you tend to be in your own little world, and you try to just make sure that everything is going on around you. And so they kind of drew me out and had me be a part of the Cincinnati Preschool Promise, along with some other things. But I really appreciate that. I really appreciate the support of everyone on the board. Everyone's been great. I got all these flowers and accolades, and I got a trip to the Woodhouse Spas.
Ah.
Lovely.
All right.
Yeah.
Wonder who that came from.
Really?
Not me, but we appreciate the business.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Can't wait, so that came from the Cincinnati Preschool Promise team. I love them for it, and I appreciate it. I really do. And I thank everyone. Of course, no, I am not totally retiring. I have homeschooling to my right over here. for my grandchildren. So, but I will stay active and try to continue to along the way throughout my life.
You're
Thank
awesome.
you so much.
Wonderful, Terry.
Congratulations.
Thanks again. Congratulations. I'd also note that Christine Fisher has been named by the Cincinnati Business Courier to their 40 under 40 list last week. So congratulations to you, Christine. So the danger of getting an award like that so young is that we expect really big things from you going forward. So, but congratulations to you, and you're already delivering on your promise for sure.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
That brings us to the next item on the agenda, which is the agenda approval itself. Do you have the agenda that you can throw up for us? There we go. Yeah, so this is the agenda that we're approving. It was the one that was sent to you most recently, so I hope you have that in front of you as well. So here's the agenda, and so I'll entertain a motion to approve it from someone, please.
So moved by
Moved.
Cheryl.
Thank you, Cheryl. And was that you, Bishop Tate, coming in, or Odell?
Odell.
Okay, we'll call that a second. So all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed or abstaining? So let the minutes, or let the record show that on a motion made by Cheryl Rose and seconded by Odell Owens, the agenda was unanimously approved, which brings us to the review and approval of the minutes as well. Those were circulated in advance. And so I'll invite any comments or corrections to the minutes from anyone present. Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve them.
So moved, Deborah Alsop.
Thanks, Deborah. And a second, of course.
Have State second.
Thank you very much. Bishop Tate now, right?
It's going to take some getting used to, yes, sir.
For all of us, you know, it's like you've changed your name or something like that, you know, so, but congratulations to you. So all those in favor of approving the minutes as moved by Deborah Alsop and seconded by Bishop Tate, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
And those
Aye.
opposed or abstaining? So the motion, so on a motion made by Deborah Alsop and seconded by Bishop Tate, as noted, the minutes from the last meeting of June 23rd were unanimously approved. So thank you for that. This brings us to the mission moment, but I understand that we're having a little technical difficulty with this. Is that correct, Leslie?
Yes, we are waiting for Sherry Johnson to come on the line. Can I suggest we move on to the next?
Sure, we'll do that. We'll just start moving through. So jumping to item number 4 then as a result, Chara, give us a little bit of a update on Responsible Restart Ohio. There's a lot of pre-read material on this in your material as well. So Chara.
Yes, thank you. I will just kind of hit the highlights of kind of giving you the landscape of where we are with community providers and early childhood education contact. Many of you saw and we shared that the governor allowed as of August 9th for many providers to return to those pre-COVID ratios and issued a new set of guidelines in terms of social distancing and health and safety protocols. We found that some of our providers are returning to those pre-COVID ratios. Most are doing a gradual return, doing it on a week-by-week basis to assess what their staffing needs are, as well as how they're able to maintain any exposures and contacts. Providers were offered a grant if they stayed at the reduced COVID ratios. Those deadlines and information were released on the 24th and 31st to incentivize people to sort of stay at those reduced ratios. We have implemented a new system where we send a text message to all of our providers, tuition assistance providers, over the weekend, so that on Monday morning we get a fresh start and we know how many empty seats they have and what their capacity is. So we're trying to keep track of what the ratios are and how everybody's operating. I'm sure you've all seen by now as well that CPS is Orientations begin this week and remote instruction begins on the 31st. And our preschoolers were issued iPads and access to internet service to help them with that remote learning. On the next slide, a few down, you will see what we've been doing in terms of tuition assistance and outreach. Few more slides down. For our enrollment, we ended up at about 352 enrolled in our extended learning session. As of today, updated numbers of about 360 who have applied for the fall. We did start our program year yesterday, and by start our program year, meaning make tuition assistance available for that next class. We're doing everything we can to make enrollment easy for parents and providers. Using forms that were previously submitted, waiving some notarization requirements to make sure that it's easy for parents who are trying to get their kids in preschool to be able to do that. We're also looking very closely at our pending applications in a new way so that if it's a document holdup, we can get that cleared. We know that this year is going to look different. While we always had a goal and an outlook to say we're trying to get 1,000 students engaged, our temporary kind of stretch goal for right now, we are targeting between 500 to try to get in immediately and moving toward that goal in the next couple of weeks, because we know a lot of factors are in play in terms of not only capacity, but parents' concern about return and the logistics of making that happen. We have specific outreach strategies and parent engagement strategies to make that happen, including our preschool chats that we're doing live on Facebook that are candid conversations with providers and parents and members of the community to say, what are the challenges? What are the opportunities, so that we have transparent and live discussions about what the return to preschool looks like and the value that the preschool promise brings. We have resumed in-person events where you will see us out in the community, socially distanced, doing on-site enrollment and information share. We're able to do some literature drops too at the Black Family Reunion, some job fairs like one that Cincinnati Work sponsored. So that has resumed as much as possible. We are also continuing our digital engagement with both parents and providers to make sure that they know what's happening with preschool providers in the community. You'll see the highlights there of the things that have been happening. Our biggest and most responsive tool has been our new text messaging. And believe it or not, parents have really responded that they appreciate direct mail, postcards that they receive. So that's kind of a snapshot of where we are with tuition assistance. If we go down on our next slide, community providers, 236 providers that have partnered with us. Most have said, 93%, they plan to reopen in August. We know that now Head Start is starting remotely with CAA, and our parochial schools are delayed too, with starting with remote learning as well, rather than in person. Number of quality seats is changing regularly, ratios are changing, and providers are successfully managing temporary closures when they have those. Some are recommended for 1 or 2 day temporary closures. Some have had 2 weeks of temporary closures. They are able to manage those and reopen, and we're seeing families return after that period of closure and reopening. So they are successfully able to do that. Proud to say that we have 146 QI providers and 90 TA providers for a total of 236 community providers in our system. On the next slide, you will see our plans to continue to add more quality seats to the system. What we had originally planned for bringing in those new providers and seats to reach 200 was phased out in each quarter. Those are pre-COVID ratios when we start looking at putting those seats in there. So we know that that will fluctuate. We've had resuming delivery of equipment and materials, learning supplies. We're kind of back to normal as much as we can with the Step Up to Quality review and how that's been rolling out. And I'm pleased to say that just since June 1st, we've had 13 providers that have had reviews and reached high quality. We know the ongoing challenges to that will continue to be staffing. That is the biggest challenge that we hear from providers. Providers' capacity to continue with that QI work, given all the other things that they have to do. And also a provider's decision on the best model as it looks for them to provide preschool seats or school-age kid seats. I don't know how many of you saw yesterday, but ODJFS did release some new guidance, and they have found a small pool of funds that will allow currently licensed childcare providers to use publicly funded childcare dollars to serve school-age children who are working remotely when their school district is doing remote learning. It also allows for some new licensing of new entities that will serve that school-age child. What we're hoping is that most providers will maintain the quality preschool seats is there and have space to do school-age children as they need to. But we know a lot of that is going to be dependent upon business models and most effective and efficient for each community provider. So that is kind of a snapshot of where we are with quality seats in the system. On the next slide, you will see that the increased community engagement efforts, and I will say that now for us, that's a team sport. Not just our marketing and community engagement PR people, but everybody has an aspect and a role in that community engagement place. Thank you so much to the board who shared and gave comment and feedback on our summer snackables. We ended that campaign on Friday of last week with those updates. You will start to see this week new touch points and a new campaign to really engage the board members in spreading the word and sending out the information. Our Mask Up campaign is new, so you will see people from all over the world actually sharing the Mask Up initiative and wearing Preschool Promise mask. And we are starting a new initiative as well where we will be doing virtual tours of community provider locations so that people can actually see what it's like at a community provider, what changes providers have been made, the innovation that they've done to welcome students and educate students, not only in that classroom, but what they're doing with parents and community overall. We're also seeing that our Facebook engagement is going up a little bit and our newsletter and touch points are increasing in our open rates. So that is what we've been busy doing with community engagement. So those are our highlights.
Are there any questions for Chara before we move? Looks like we're going back to the mission moment, so I'll must be well there. But any questions for Chara before we move on?
I had one question from part of what you said, but the material too. Are the grants one-time only grant? Okay.
Right. So the grants from ODJFS to maintain the reduced ratios were for August and September. What providers have to do is turn in their records, their attendance sheet to show any revenue loss and what happens with that. For some providers, as you know, that's a very complicated process, but it is anticipated now and announced that those were for August and September. JFS has not said the availability of those grants beyond that.
Thank you.
We're hopeful.
Anyone else? Leslie, are we ready for Flo to introduce Sherry Johnson to us?
Yes, we are.
Perfect. Flo, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope everybody is having a pleasant day. I'm very excited to be introducing Miss Sherry Johnson. Miss Sherry Johnson is been in the early childhood profession for about 20 years now. She is a type B provider, which means she can have 6 children or less. She's located in the beautiful Westwood, which is one of our quality gap neighborhoods. But because of Ms. Johnson, of course, we're able to serve more quality care or provide more quality seats. She joined our quality improvement program in April of 2018. And at that time, she was a 1-star provider. Since then, Ms. Johnson was awarded 3 stars in October 2019, and she converted over and joined the tuition assistance program in December 2019. Ms. Johnson also specializes in special needs children. And let me just say, her smile will light up any room. So it's a pleasure for me to introduce Miss Sherry Johnson. Yay!
See me? Can you guys see me? I don't see myself. Well, anyway, like she said, my name is Sherry Johnson. Can you guys see me? Can you hear me? Wait a minute, I'm sorry. Let me turn up my sound. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay, thank you.
We can hear you, but we can't see you.
You can't see me? Okay, I'm sorry. Well, you got my picture right there. So, like Miss Flo said, I've been doing family child care for about 20 years. And I first began doing family child care because I had my second child, and he was a boy, and I was having problems with the daycare that he was going to because he was very busy. And so and at that time I worked in nursing, I worked in surgery. So I left my job and I stayed home with my son. And then I just had such a good time just being with my son and learning. He taught me so much, learning about, boys and, cause it's different, and just, and being home with him and sharing home with him, I just decided that I wanted to stay. And then when he went to school, when he got a kindergarten, I wanted to continue staying home. So I started doing it in my home a little bit. And then even after it slacked off here at me at home, I worked in some schools. And the first school that I worked into was out in Miami town. And they had mostly children with special needs in that area. So I learned so much from those children, about myself and about children, how you got to individualize each child to where that started me off on my career today. And I'm so grateful for that experience, been working with special needs children, because all children are different. That you can have children that might have the same behavior challenges, but you got to go about it a different way. And I learned so much from that environment, that I just, I bring all of that experience to my home.
Sherry, congratulations to you. I didn't mean to cut you off. It sounds like you kind of came to the end of your presentation. This is Mike Graham speaking.
Okay, how are you?
Good, I'm well, thank you. I want to congratulate you especially on your attention to special needs kids. Having some special needs nieces and nephews in my own family, that's near and dear to my heart. So it takes a very special person to work with special needs kids in my experience. And so hats off to you. I was wondering how it is that, you're looking forward to the next couple of weeks and months as the school year gets off the ground once again. And but in this very strange and uncertain environment, how are you doing with all of that?
In family child care, it's never a dull moment, and you always be able to roll with the punches. I love it. It's going to be another experience for me to see how I'm going to be able to. I have a school age child, just be able to keep her focused. It's just going to be another challenge, and I'm looking forward to it.
That's a great attitude for you to have, Sherry. I applaud that. I'm going to try to remember your words and continue looking forward to it myself in my day job. Does anyone else have any questions for Sherry before we move on the agenda?
I'd like to intervene a little bit. Miss Sherry, this is Flo speaking. Can you please just tell us about your experience with QI to TA, please?
Yeah. I mean, it's very, it's never a dull moment. It's like it's as a family child care, that we got to roll with the punches. So this business is forever changing. And I want to say working with Cincinnati Preschool Promise, it's just been awesome. Like they're forever, saying, how can we help you? Whatever else that we can assist you to be better at, to help you with your job. And that's nice to hear, from us at our standpoint as family child care, because we're alone by ourselves. So we pretty much have to figure out a lot of stuff on our own. We don't have anyone else to go to pretty much. We got to figure it out on our own. So it is really nice having Cincinnati Preschool Promise want to hand that out and say, whatever you guys need, we're there for you.
This is Vanessa. I have a question. Sherry, thank you so much for your presentation. And I'm imagining your beautiful smile because I can see it in the picture.
Sorry, I know.
No, I can see it. I almost feel like, did you come to intro sessions when we first started? You look familiar.
I'm not for sure.
You look familiar, but nonetheless, Are you caring for any special needs children at the moment? And if so, have you, how are the parents faring? How are the parents of those children and the children faring in this time in terms of getting their needs met?
I would have to say parents with special needs children always have this is always their concern. They always have a hard time finding people who will watch their children. And because a lot of people, because it's uncertainty, you never know. I think a lot of providers just don't know what to expect from children with special needs. If you ask me, they're all the same. You know, they just keep you on your toes. Some are just a little bit more busier than others, and all kids learn differently. And that's how I look at them all. So I don't know if it's a special need. I know that's how it's, you know, labeled or whatever, but.
Do you have any with IEPs?
I have had in the past. My own kids have IEPs.
But not right now. Okay.
2 boys. I don't have any right now. I just had a boy that had autism. And actually his mother works at 4C for children. In the past, I've had, you know, maybe about 3 years ago, I've had children that had, I had 3 boys with autism, and 2 of them spoke and they were brothers, and 1 of them didn't speak. So you just use a lot of visual clues. And I had a girl who had Rats, and she was older, so she didn't speak at all. I pretty much had to do everything for her. She could feed herself finger foods, but I would have to take her on and off the bathroom. So I think since I've always had that from the beginning, I pretty much stay on my toes. Keeps me.
Are you promoted as someone with that level of skill and ability and experience?
I might not be promoted in maybe with you guys, but there's a network of
word of mouth
here.
Yeah,
they know. So we have a network over here on the west side of town. So they pretty much know if there comes a kid that has special needs, they just say, oh, they'll hand out my name, or they'll just call me.
Well, that's as Father Graham mentioned. I have a grandchild now with special needs, but I had a son who worked with children with special needs from 13 to 23, and it takes I know that all children are children, but it takes a level of giftedness. I admired him in so many ways. It takes a level of care and giftedness and patience that I know is I can do it with one. So I applaud you for being able to have that level of a huge heart. So thank you so much for everything you're doing.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else before we go on?
Father Graham, we have a member of the public that would like to, who's raised their hand. So I'm just going to allow them to speak if that's okay with you.
At this time, yes. For this purpose, yes.
Oh, I'm on mute. Oh, no.
Cassie, you can go ahead and speak. Looks like she's not there, Father Graham.
All right, let's we'll move on then. Sherry, once again, thank you very much for the terrific job that you do on behalf of the children and the families you serve, and all the best in these uncertain times as the school year in front of us unfolds for us. So thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you, guys. You're welcome. Have an awesome day.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
We thought it'd be good to let people kind of know what's going on in terms of the planning towards the levy. Informal conversations over the course of a few months yielded the shaping of a kind of task force, if you will, that has been in place for about a month or so and has had a couple of different meetings. the kind of the steering of the campaign effort is being led by the same people who worked on the levy in 2016. They are Jens Suckmuller, who's the go-to guy for levy efforts that CPS runs, and then joined by consultants from Burgess and Burgess based in Cleveland, but they were very helpful in the 2016 effort as well. And I've been, in my experience with them, just very impressed by the level of professionalism they bring, and they have worked on other campaigns like this elsewhere, and so can bring an interesting perspective to bear. I'd say that right now what's happening is lots and lots of kind of early work, all of which is obvious, I suspect. So for example, the fact sheet that has been, that was shared with you that Leslie has on the screen now kind of constitutes the major talking points. What we were told when we met most recently was that not all of these bullet points would be used in every single communication about the levy, but the one bullet point that would be used all of the time in every single communication will be the very first point noted, that voter approval of the issue will not increase taxes, it will, and so on. So that's the steady point that they want us always to remind people of. We had some conversations about moving towards beginning to raise money to fund the campaign itself. We have a basic timeline for the campaign that's been put together. Those who are steering it will be putting together a speakers bureau and sort of a contact list. They're really eager for us to make sure that we leverage all of our networks as thoroughly as possible, while some polling results that they did several months ago tilt favorably in for the campaign. They don't believe that we should be kind of sitting on our hands comfortable of the success of it ultimately, but rather really leverage all the contacts that we have to get the positive word out. They're talking about how to, what the social media strategy will be, what the paid media strategy will be, how that will unfold over time, as well as various kind of get out the vote strategies. So it's hard for me to think that, years ago when this effort began, for those of us who were there around the table in January 2017, as this board was just getting started, as CPP was getting off the ground, we kept talking about how it was that down the road there would be a levy renewal effort, and that seemed at that point very far off. Well, here it is. But everything is kind of pointing favorably for us. So at any rate, this gives you a sense as to where things are now. We're going to be coming to the board more specifically in September with additional information as to where things are. But again, with the idea of using board members as to get the word out via their contact networks and to speak as occasion lends itself. So Marcia, you're also one of the folks on that steering committee. If there's anything that you'd like to add to what I've just said.
I think you covered pretty much everything we talked about in the last two meetings I've been in. I think what I took away from this is that this campaign season is just very different. And so because of COVID, and I think there's a effort that has to take place to get people out to the polls. And so those GoTV efforts are very important as well, not only to the people running for office, but for this levy as well. So I just wanted to add that. We just really got to get people to the polls.
That's a really good point, Marcia. Thank you very much.
And get them to vote down the ballot to the issue.
Right. So at any rate, all that is going forward well, I think, at this point. So I don't know if there's any questions that folks would have about it. Okay, so moving
I have
on.
a question. This
Oh,
is Debbie.
Shoot,
This is
Debbie.
Debbie Alsop. Has the levy committee started meeting? I thought there was a different organizational group that was called something else, but have all the members of the levy committee been appointed and have they started meeting?
Yes, as Marcia said, that we've had 2 meetings so far. So, so yes, there's representatives from a variety of different constituencies on it. I don't have the list in front of me, so I can't tell you exactly who they all are. But so yes, it's met several times now. Maybe it's 3 times, Chara. There was, I think there was one meeting I was unable to make. Do you remember?
Yeah, they've met twice so far,
Okay,
and
twice then.
bi-weekly meetings are going forward.
Right.
Would you be in a position to share the membership with the CPP board and an upcoming mailing for our next meeting?
Yeah, I don't see why not. We'll make sure that you have that information.
Has there been money raised for the campaign, and how's that going?
Too early to say. My sense is that there's a little bit of money left over from the last campaign, but there's a need to really mount a significant fundraising effort to raise the dollars that we need, and that was kind of forthcoming. So we had a lot of conversation at this past meeting about how to organize around that, but there was no target set or anything like that. So we're very early in that part of the business, Sally.
So Father Graham, this is Vanessa.
Yes, Vanessa.
So last time, like really before this time in August, there was a joint resolution. And if I'm not mistaken, it was August 4th. And the sense of urgency around having it done at that time with COVID. Is it behind? And then has there been any conversation about a joint resolution this time? Is that necessary?
So thank you for asking that. That's kind of the next item on the agenda, actually.
Okay.
But I can go to that if you'd like. So the executive committee had a good conversation about, here's the copy of that resolution that you're referencing from 2016. It's August 2nd, so you were within 2 days, which after 4 years you're allowed that. So the executive committee had a good conversation about what sort of shared vision 2.0, so to speak, would look like. And as you know, that this shared resolution helped to shape the master agreement. And as you know, the master agreement has really shaped our relationship with CPS and how it is that we've operated with them and so on. We've talked from time to time about the various ways in which the master agreement needs to be updated to capture the differences between what it said and the practice as it's evolved. And so the executive committee, as we talked about this issue when we met, last week, I guess, or week before last, the issue was, should we use this as an opportunity to capture all the differences and kind of push those forward in a joint resolution, or should we do something that was more general? And we opted in that direction. And so the language that we've proposed to CPS has to do with the functional autonomy that CPP needs to do its job effectively, because we really can't, rather than having a sort of a new master agreement that has all these different particulars, and then having novel situations arise like COVID, which led to the extended learning experiences over the summer, that we would prefer not to have to anticipate particular adaptations, but rather to have that kind of, again, functional autonomy make decisions as we believe that we need to make them going forward. And that will really allow CPP to do its job. And so I'll turn things over to Chara from here in terms of getting that document forward. So what we are going to be doing is taking that proposal to CPS for its endorsement, just as happened here in 2016. Chara, do you want to fill in other details around that?
Sure. We had a meeting this morning with the CPS team asking exactly this question, process going forward and timeline so that we could try to get this moving. And I think they are in an agreement to say, let's have a series of sit downs with the staff team and say, let's draft out some things so that we both, it's a joint proposal, a joint resolution that will be presented to both boards. So that is in the works of those drafting and those provisions. Some are things that just have to change functionally because the situation is different now with CPP as an entity. So there's some general housekeeping things in there that aren't substantive, that don't really apply to the vision, just how we're structured and how we're working that need to be updated. We want to get those out of the way first. And so legal counsel is working on cleaning those pieces up and then to come back to you with a proposal that, you know, and a recommendation from the staff teams that say, this is what the shared piece would look like. Please give us your feedback.
Will this happen on the 17th at the joint meeting or whenever? I could have my days messed up on that too.
I think that is our target goal, to try to make sure we can get it there. And so preview copies prior to that. The first time you see it won't be at that meeting, but in order to try to get it queued up in advance so that we have a consensus. And I think the joint meeting would be an ideal time to say, yes, this is the vote of confidence from the partners and moving forward to say how preschool expansion is going to look and to submit, kind of tee us up for sharing that with the public and hopefully with the voters as well.
Okay. Thank you.
I was hoping that you'd gotten to that point in that conversation that you had today, so I'm glad to hear that, Chara. Chara and I hadn't had a chance to touch bases following that meeting of the implementation group today, so good news there. Unless there are other questions on that, we can move into the committee updates. Well, actually, we're in the committee updates with the joint vision resolution coming from the executive committee. And so we'll turn things over to Debbie for a bunch of material from the governance committee. I would just say, by way of an introduction, that you'll recall that the September meeting is our annual meeting at which we vote formally on a number of things pertinent to the CPP Board of Members membership, leadership, and the like. And so all the work that the governance committee has been doing has been pointing us in the direction of the September meeting. So Debbie, take it away.
Yeah. Is Jacob on the call, Shar?
I'm here.
Okay, so I'm going to tee this up and go through some of the proposed changes to the governance principles. And this document that was mailed to you will be considered a first reading for the boards to review and comments, questions today, and then asking for a approval at the September 22nd meeting. So let's go back to where the first set of changes occur. It is under section 6, please. And this was raised several months ago about the term of the board chair. That term was not defined, and what is being proposed is that there would be a defined term for the board chair and that the chair could serve not more than 3 consecutive years. That's the first. Go back, Leslie, please, to that section that we were talking about. Okay, the last change in that section, this allows for the class of 2020 to serve the same number of terms that the other original classes served. That was not provided for in the original document. what was put forth was that the class of 2020's term would just stop at September 30th, 2020. Going down, some of these are just, I think, editorial changes. If we would, I'd just like to talk about the charters that have been proposed for each of the standing committees. And some committees are moving forward at a different pace than others. So I talked to Shara about the charters. The charters will not become part of the governance document because the charters will also have names of members which can or would change from year to year. So I think all of the committees have at least had the opportunity to talk about their charters, and the goal would be for the charters to be developed and brought to the board in no later than January, but would not be incorporated in the governance document for the reasons that I stated, but would be approved by the board. Next, I believe we're looking at section 10, board operations. Okay, we need to move to, okay. If you remember, there were some questions raised about the executive sessions of the board, and I believe this occurred last summer, if you will. So we had brought forward some guidance to the Preschool Promise Board about executive sessions in 2019, and that is a set of guidance that is not part of this document, but that is an operational principle, if you will. So if anyone would like to see that, again, we can share that document with you, but it is notated in the governance principles that it does exist. The last the last section is section 16, and it's on the advocacy approval process. And I'd like to tee that up for Jacob because we spent some conversational time at the board level. The governance committee has looked at this twice, and so there is a proposal for an addition to the governance principles that I'd like for him to spend a minute or two in regard to the addition of this, and also a comment that was made at the executive committee, which I believe was incorporated in here about the role of the entire board of managers in the advocacy process.
Let me just also say that it was this topic that the executive committee spent by far the bulk of its time on as we discussed these recommendations coming from the governance committee. So Jake?
Sure, thanks. And just so that I remember correctly, is this something that I know we've taken this draft through a few different committees. Has the full board at least seen the initial draft of this section, or is this a first impression for everyone?
I don't believe it has seen this.
The board has not seen this draft. What the board saw back in June, I believe, were some broad principles.
Right.
And it was stated at that time that we would go from those broad principles to drafting a process to bring back to the board.
Okay, that's helpful. Thanks. So just to give you a recollection then of where we've come from and where we're at now, the problem that was presented, especially to Shara, was that we've been asked many different times in the past to sign on behalf of Preschool Promise's name onto different causes. And obviously that becomes very difficult with a large organization like Preschool Promise for the executive director to try to make a decision, especially in a quick time frame, about whether or not she wants to put Preschool Promise's name behind a certain piece of advocacy. And the line that we were drawing there was, first and foremost, what you do in your free time is your free time. So we're not talking about causes that you advocate for outside of Preschool Promise or in your own individual name, as opposed to doing it on behalf of Preschool Promise. So that is kind of first and foremost the guiding principle. The second thing is, these are this is mostly intended to address advocacy as opposed to lobbying. And although we mentioned the lobbying, the difference there is promoting certain things without specifically trying to influence any particular political person or entity or any piece of legislation. So this is broadly advocating for things that we feel is within Preschool Promise's mandate and purview. And that was what was put in front of the board at the last probably a few meetings ago, which were those themes that we discussed. And that was something that I think originated with Shara and went through a few different groups. But the idea is, first and foremost, Shara, if presented with an advocacy opportunity, would measure that against those guiding principles and decide whether or not it falls broadly into something that Preschool Promise should be doing or shouldn't be doing. And that's just kind of a gating question to say, is this even reasonably within the scope of something that Preschool Promise does or should be doing? And then if the answer to that is yes, then we tried to give her some framework through which she could work quickly, efficiently, and have some comfort that there's some buy-in from Preschool Promise as a whole, without having to go to 15 different members and decide whether or not we're comfortable with this. And so there is some delegation of authority that goes on here. And the big factor, once she's decided whether or not it falls into those principles, is then to decide how much time she has. And I can tell you, just from experiencing this firsthand, sometimes that's not a lot. We will often be asked to sign on to a piece of advocacy with less than 24 hours notice, in some cases just a few hours. And that's just the name of the game. It has nothing to do with Preschool Promise's efforts. That's just whomever is sending it to us hasn't given us a huge amount of time to work with. In those instances, we understand that we need to be able to work quickly. And so that would be the expedited approval that you see in Part B. That is anything less than 48 hours. And then a regular approval would be if Shara has more than 48 hours to make a decision, then of course she would go to a few more people. Under the expedited scenario, she would go to a few designated people, which is basically, in this case, I think we've just got the board chair. So if she's got a very quick turnaround, she will try to get as much buy-in as possible, but she specifically would have to go to Father Graham or the next board chair to get approval of this. And if approved, she can do it. If not, then it kind of dies on the vine there. Under a regular approval scenario, if she has greater than 48 hours, then she would first try to seek a member of the board that has expertise in that particular area, get some buy-in from that particular member, and she would also seek approval from the board chair, the treasurer, and again, any other person with relevant subject matter. So that is, in a nutshell, kind of the broad framework. Of course, Shara, we've been operating kind of under this guiding principle now for at least a month. I think it's been working out pretty well. We've had a few things that Shara has signed on to, and we've run through this system. As we do it more, we will get better at this. Obviously, some suggestions from the board are welcome. One big suggestion that we had, and I think it might have come from Bishop Tate, was, to the extent that it's possible, you should really be involving the board on the front end and in the back end. So if time permits, we've added an additional clarification sentence for those members of the executive committee that are here that have seen the initial draft. We've added, under the second paragraph that begins with approval process, just a one-sentence statement that says whenever possible, she's going to try to involve the board as a whole. Meaning, if she's got plenty of time and you're at a meeting and it's something that she can do, she should involve board engagement with that particular decision. But at the very least, whenever we make these advocacy decisions, we should be continuing to keep the board informed of all advocacy actions that have been taken, so that the board knows where we're at and can reasonably speak to those items if they're asked questions about them. That's a quick rundown of what's going on here, but obviously I welcome any questions or comments.
Hi, this is Vanessa. Just quick peru. I'm wondering if something, I get that the approval process, what would be the notification process? Like, has there been something that has been signed on to?
Yes, we
And
did.
and just and I this might expose me in not reading every single update, but is that how you're informing when you decide to sign on? How are you letting the board know so that it knows in case it is approached?
Right. So the quickest example I could get, and it was a very compact turnaround time, was the op-ed that we partnered with CAA and the United Way to put out about federal funding for childcare programs. We had a 2-hour window to respond to the sign-on to do that. I sent it to 3 board members. They said, yes, we think this is okay. I signed on, got the final version, and with an hour, probably 2 hours of signing on, sent something out to the board saying, this is the op-ed that will appear, and then resent it again in our weekly Wednesday snackable. So I know we send you a lot, but immediately, right? The immediate notification, there's no delay. My only delay was waiting on the final wordsmith version that was sent to the editor and sent out to the media before I sent it all over, right? The final version. And so in any case, the longest it would be, if it's not immediate send out, if it's something that's embargoed or something else, is in the weekly update that we do for the Board of Managers every Wednesday. It will definitely be in there.
Okay.
How does this language compare to other nonprofits?
Sure, that's a good question. I can tell you, obviously, the language probably differs, but the principle is roughly the same. Every nonprofit, first and foremost, is concerned with the question of advocacy versus lobbying. And that's a legal question simply because you want to preserve your 501c3 tax-exempt status. The lobbying efforts cannot be a, quote, substantial part of your activities. And I won't get into what that means. The IRS isn't even really sure what that means, but there's some good guidance there. So first and foremost, that is a very typical policy for nonprofits to bifurcate advocacy versus lobbying. And then the question of how this particular process compares to other nonprofits, I've seen it done a few different ways. And the timing thing is usually a crucial component. And I would say this is definitely in line with what other nonprofits are doing. They just may have very specific instances. If there's any deviation at all, it would be specific types of whatever field they're practicing in. So for instance, if it's in the art world, they may be involving different members of their board very specifically for that. In this case, if it's early childhood education or something like that, Shara is going to whoever she can in this particular space, but this is definitely in line with what other nonprofits are doing.
Thank you.
Oh, go ahead, Dr. Renz.
No, just thank you.
The one other thing that I've seen a number of places is a broad public policy, maybe not so broad, specifics that allow the CEO to act without approval. It would be, I don't know what we might choose, but in this case, we might say anything related to increased state funding for childcare and preschool, or I'm not exactly sure what certain standards that increase quality. I'm not proposing that we do that, but I think that the more flexibility we can give Shara, the more we can have our voices heard on behalf of kids in this program. So I don't know if we want to take that extra step about giving some guidelines about things that she does not have to go through a check process, but I'm just saying that's what some other nonprofits do.
Yeah, and Sally, I would say that's a fantastic point, and that's something that we discussed when we were doing this. Obviously, there's many different ways that we could, but that kind of green light, automatic don't pass go scenario is something we talked about. And really, the point of this is to give Shara as much flexibility as legally possible, but we also balance that in the interest of transparency and understanding that Preschool Promise is kind of this special entity that there are a lot of kind of political questions involved with CPS and the United Way and public taxpayer dollars, et cetera. And so it's really a question of this board's comfort in terms of what she can and cannot do. This is just how we proposed it, and then we put it on paper, and it's how we've been doing it. We are open and flexible to any other kind of iteration that, as much flexibility as the board is willing to give her, I would say that.
This is Vanessa again. I think this is just my personal opinion. I think this does give a lot of flexibility, especially the scenarios around the A, B, and C, and also give Shara time to make a good decision. I think C gives the flexibility that she needs to check in with check in with you. And again, in this, it's still a public entity. So I think that erring on the side of, flexibility versus time to make a good decision is good.
I'd like to build on Vanessa's point there. I think that what's also the case is that this way of proceeding gives Shara cover that I think is really important. In the event that for whatever reason, something that seems intuitively obvious to her is not intuitively obvious to another board member or to a board member, it's useful for her to have been able to, check the boxes, so to speak, of running it by legal counsel, running it by the chair, other content experts on the board, and the like. That this allows, I think, the flexibility she needs while providing her an appropriate level of coverage. Are there other comments or questions of people? Bishop Tate?
I was just reiterating to all of the points that have been made that we want to make sure that the board, especially and I've heard everybody say it, and I agree that Shara has the flexibility to make these, as she's getting these requests or whatever the case may be, to how the protocols will work, but to make sure that those board members are connected. I think it was Dr. White that said, how are we notified? Now, we may not be involved in the protocols for, I won't use the word permission, but at least clarity of what's being done. But I really want to make sure that the board members are notified. So in the event that that particular support comes out publicly, I want all board members to be aware that our organization has supported something, and our organization leader has sought the necessary protocols to make sure that we are connected to something that's going to reflect CPP.
Are there other questions or comments on this? Again, this is our first reading, and so any feedback that we provide today that would result in the modification of this material would come back to us for final approval in September. So is there anything now, or we're kind of nearing the speak now or forever hold your peace moment on this one? Good. Thank you. You have several other governance items that you want to share with us, I'm pretty sure, Deborah.
Yeah, these are for information at this time. We have received from each of the nominating organizations their nominations for now what becomes the class of 2023. Bishop Ennis Tate from Promise Forward, Odell Owens and Deborah Alsop from Cincinnati Public Schools, Gary Lindgren and Anthony Hobson from the United Way of Greater Cincinnati. And in the class of 2022 to complete Father Graham's term as a nominee from the United Way. United Way has submitted Dr. James Williams, who is the president of Mount St. Joe. So that's by way of update on the vacancies or the term expiration. We have just an update on the nomination of officers. Again, the officers of the Preschool Promise Board are the chair, the treasurer, and the secretary. And the governance committee brings forward its recommendations to the board at the annual meeting to vote on the officers. So we have for the chair what we extended to the board at the June meeting. If anyone was interested in the offices to send letters to the governance committee before our July 30th meeting. And we have 2 letters of interest for the chair. The treasurer, we have 1 person who has stated interest, and for the secretary, there is 1 individual, and that's a pending. So that's where we stand on the officers. We meet again on September 10th, and we'll be prepared to send to the board our recommendations for each one of those positions. And again, the board will vote on the officers at the annual meeting on September 22nd. So that's our report from the governance committee.
Any questions for Debbie as she concludes her report? Hearing none, I guess it's over to you, Cheryl, for the Finance and Audit Committee update.
The exciting topic of the day. Hope everyone is well. There are 2 things that I'll be covering today. First will be our fiscal year 20 results and provide you with a brief update on the fiscal year 21 budget. So first on fiscal year results, as you see in front of you, I draw your attention to the column that's titled Actuals, fiscal year 20 year to date. And I'll take you to 2 fairly important line items. And really that is the breakdown between sum of programs and sum of administrative expense. Now this is something that is obviously important as you look towards financials of any institution such as ours. Currently it stands at 78% of the dollars spent went towards program expense versus 22% administrative expense. Not a bad number in and of itself, but the reality is we do have items that are showing up today in some of administrative expense that we will contemplate actually moving specifically. So I'm going to try to get a little bigger picture of that and that finance committee to bring to the board. Second item that is of note is notice that the end of in budget minus actuals column where we have the blue highlights, you'll notice at the bottom we have and show an underspend of $1.7 million. I think the thing, just to provide some perspective here, we have been creating a budget in startup mode with obviously a lot of uncertainties, especially given where we are today. But the good news piece of this, well, we want to make sure that we are utilizing the taxpayer dollars in a productive way to help our mission. When we look back at the year 19 budget, there was actually 32% of our budget was underspend versus today it's only 19%. So while that's still fairly significant, and we would love to get that more refined over time, I think the good news piece of that is we are able to grow the mission and utilize more of those dollars annually. So that's something I wanted to point out. So I guess I'll pause there before we go on to discussion of the budget and entertain any questions, if I may.
Any questions for Cheryl? Hearing none, Cheryl,
All right, I like that. Okay, next regarding our fiscal year 21 process, as a reminder, we did approve the budget with the intention of holding a public hearing and making adjustments and changes to the budget as they made sense this month in August. The reality is we have continued uncertainty. CPS is in the process of redoing their budget. So the decision's been made to continue with the budget as it stands today, which fortunately has sufficient flexibility to allow us to make decisions along the way as we need to. But I think the important too is that the intention has been to have this public hearing. So we will join along CPS as part of their public budget hearing, which it sounds like they're now going to do in September. So once the budget is complete, to be able to have that forum of which we can seek and solicit public feedback as appropriate. So that is all I had to update on today. But again, any questions regarding budget, happy to entertain those.
Father Graham, this is
Yes,
Martha.
Marcy.
I had a little challenge hearing you, Cheryl, so I just want to make sure I heard it correctly. So, because CPS is still refining their budget, what we're going to do is be a part of their public hearing process for our budget as well. Did I hear that correctly?
We have always had intention of doing that in conjunction with CPS. The reality is it's more appropriate to be in that forum together. This is a piece of that common budget. And so we work and are getting better at operating more lockstep with CPS where appropriate.
Okay.
So the answer to your question, Marcia, is yes. It's just that the complexities of the present moment have forced CPS to move into September, those public hearings that they were expecting to have. And we will be a part of those hearings such that there's one general public conversation about the budgets.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheryl, of course, thank you as always for your good work on this. Bishop Tate, so we've come to you now to give us a bit of an update with respect to the Community Engagement Committee and its work.
Well, if you remember, Father Graham, the charter gave a very detailed opening comments regarding all that's happening. There's some additional things as you see coming up the calendar.
I loved her comment about how it's a team sport, for example.
Right. And I'm a team player, and so I want to celebrate her and the staff for the work that they've been doing. I missed the last meeting, and I want to thank Dr. Vanessa White for carrying on in my stead. The work that's going on the ground now, of course, is adjusting and changing every day, as you've heard in Charles' report. And it's just simply because of the current state of what's going on in our nation and what's going on in our city regarding COVID-19. They are actively engaging with our providers, just making sure that we're able to assist, as Shara said, in every way possible, some of the traditional ways and some not so traditional, but just to make sure that providers are getting everything that they need. Likewise, we're trying to make sure that we connect with parents so that those parents can be reassured that everything that's happening as it relates to this issue is being addressed from a state level, but more importantly from the CPP staff on how we can provide the assurance that the providers are doing everything that they need to do to make this kid safe, as well as the support that we're trying to provide when it relates to tuition assistance and the other things that we're doing. I would say to us as a board that as our staff is continuously working in the community, that we too are also representing CPP in our various communities. We not only are providing service to our parents and providers, but we are responsible to the faith community, we're responsible to the business community, we're responsible to the education community, we're responsible to the community. And one of my concerns for our work is that we spend a lot of time in the provider community and the parent community, but there's still a lot of people in the community who really don't understand what Preschool Promise is all about. And unfortunately, COVID-19 has hindered our marketing strategy and our community engagement plan for this first. We were planning to implement going into this enrollment period, and so we are going to have to make some adjustments there. But again, the calendar that you see, a list of events that are coming up. I was with Lakeisha at the Cincinnati Works event, and was able to see that parents were, she was answering questions and really engaging with those parents that were there in the Glen Meadows apartment complex, which is a much needed service that we can provide for families in that area. So I appreciate her and the team for their on the ground, boots on the ground efforts. One of the other things is that we have an outstanding community engagement committee, and I'm hoping, as I shared with Shara, that we can use that committee to really begin to dig deeper into understanding what the needs are in our community and how we can put some of those resources and or strategies in place to continue to serve our families. And that's it. And Shara has anything else, or Lakeisha, I would open it up for them to share as well. And Dr. White, I don't know if she has anything from our discussion on the previous meeting.
Anyone else? Well, Bishop Tate, I want to thank you for keeping this issue front and center, because it's so terribly important for us. And however it is that we think that the message is out there, there's always a way of making sure that the message is out there deeper and wider. And so I appreciate the effort that you bring to this. Chara, that brings up you with the executive director update.
Sure, I wanted to just highlight a few things from the narrative report to bring to your attention. Evaluation, external evaluation by Innovations is on track. We really heard and will be released the one-pager and executive summary with the annual report. Of course, we will be issuing that to the board first for feedback and information before it rolls out to the public. We also were very mindful of the provider feedback last year that said we participate in all this work and this evaluation, but the outcomes aren't always shared with us. So what's in the works is an official town hall format where we will roll out all of the results from the last year, as well as the evaluation results in partnership with the providers to share as well. I talked previously about the ODJFS guidelines that came out yesterday, and in the package of second of pre-reads yesterday, you had that one pager. We'll continue to track the progress on that and the support it's providing for families and providers, but we know that we will need to continue to work closely with our providers to try to leverage dollars to help them with school-age children if remote and distance learning continues, particularly those preschoolers that they served as part of Preschool Promise that are going to kindergarten for the first time. Providers have requested support in that, direct financial support. And as a team at Preschool Promise, we thought the best ad that we could say is, how do we go to external funders and how do we advocate and share information at the state level as well to make sure solid funding is there. So you may see ongoing opportunities and requests that are coming out to the board to keep you informed of how we're trying to support our providers in that way to make sure that those preschoolers have a strong transition. We're proud of our Preschool Promise providers who are also accessing new grant opportunities, leveraging dollars from LISC and others. And in this environment, some providers are actually expanding, making second locations, moving from family care providers to public sites. And we're pleased to see that. And that is based on new funding and new opportunities in the market. Pandemic providers also had access to the Hamilton County CARES Act fund. That deadline was Monday, but it was an opportunity to say revenue loss that occurred. We want to help you try to patch that and make sure that we stabilize the system. From an operations perspective, I know that the board had discussed appropriate discussions for staff to have, whether our role was advocacy or information in terms of the renewal levy and the campaign. If our guidelines were as strict as those of CPS employees, thanks to Jake leading the efforts as legal counsel along with the campaign team, staff has been briefed on what the most appropriate talking points are and roles that we take in response to the levy campaign. So we are compliant with that so that we should not have any challenges or problems. As always, I have to say thank you to our many, many partners that we have in this work. Since I last reported to you in our last meeting, significantly 4C for Children, has been wonderful in keeping us updated on ODJFS information, as well as communicating with providers. And as always, Vera and Superintendent Mitchell with CPS continues to be a great partner for us in how we look at the complete early childhood education landscape, preschool expansion, and education, not just our small part when we start talking about TA and QI. And so just to acknowledge and appreciate the partnership of both of those entities in helping Preschool Promise continue to deliver on the mission. What you'll also see on the next slide is a snapshot that we talked about at the last board meeting to say, where are we with our wage pilot? And just wanted to give an update that so far to date, life cycle of Teacher Promise grants, we've had 87 approved. We've seen small incremental changes in the average wage for those teachers at the time pre-Teacher Promise grant and post-Teacher Promise grant. You will also see we have 33 new applicants for our staff support fund. Based on initial findings from the evaluation, we've done some wage pilot modifications, and specifically the ones that I think are most important is doing focused business support, so that those of you who know, if you receive a Teacher Promise grant or staff support fund, we also ask the providers and the teachers to participate in certain webinars and professional development opportunities. For our staff support fund, we're really developing those out on focused business supports to help those providers identify the best business model for them to be financially sound and successful. We've had great partners in that, in talking about how we offer HR support and employee benefits so that those staff support funds can really be used as a seed investment for our QI providers to get stronger and stay stable. We also, for new Teacher Promise grant applicants, it has been an individual application process, so that for everyone that applied, they got a follow-up call from Kenitra, who has been doing a great job with this new initiative, to say, we are offering up to $4,000, but what is the amount that best suits you and fits you based on what your personal needs are? That's based on feedback that we specifically received that said it's a tax burden for some. The amount wasn't as helpful as we thought it could be, and the ongoing narrative that money isn't the only challenge to the challenges of keeping, recruiting, and retaining quality staff. We will also be asking providers to submit position and salary range to CPP every quarter as a part of the submission of their attendance sheet. That is going out with the attendance sheet in August at the end of this month to say we kind of want to keep a track and help support you in the efforts that you're doing to make comparable wages and reach that wage parity. How can we help? How can we support that? The only way that we can help to do that is if we have an idea of what positions are in each provider location and what the salary range is. So you'll start to see, rather than just at evaluation time and update on that, and just at pilot time, a quarterly collection of data and a report out of where we are in the system. On the next slide, in addition to that, you will see a preview from our evaluation. Innovations did a survey of some providers, and we found that 87% of the teachers at the TA level were learning $15 or more, and 53% of QI. We hope that our staff support fund will help give some relief to those QI providers and increase that percentage as we implement this pilot over the next year. We were fortunate to have a specialized briefing from the Women's Fund on the cliff effect that really inspired us to think about some flexible ways that we could help with that constant struggle to keep and maintain staff. Got feedback from provider that the challenges in the system that we know are ongoing is that many teachers and instructors and early childhood education staff are aging out. Many have their own childcare demands in this COVID environment that are doing remote learning that don't allow them the flexibility of work or to return to the system. And what we heard loud and clear, not only from our providers, but at the local and national level as well, is that sometimes money is not just the solver to the problem, that it is overall a system look that we have to try to be engaged in to say, what is happening with the early childhood education workforce? We're committed to that by specifically working with our local partners, with 4C, and with Groundwork Ohio as well. So we will have a deeper dive on the wage pilot information. Cost of Quality Committee will be meeting soon. We are coordinating with Gary, gave him the heads up. We're about to get that committee starting to convene again to get some work done based on that data. So we'll do a more detailed report to come, but did want to give you a highlight of where we are so far. So that's what I have. last piece, the looking forward, is really to, again, I always want to give the board a perspective and how we're looking at a system approach to this. We always talk about kindergarten readiness and early childhood education, but COVID has forced us to look at this differently and say the KRA may not be the only way that we measure that kindergarten readiness, and that preschool is one way that we get to that kindergarten readiness, but how do we look at education in a larger context? We are laser focused on making sure that we stabilize and support our providers, that we do a better job and expand our parent engagement to not only talk about preschool, but also early childhood education, mindful of the role that we play in stabilizing the childcare workforce, the rapid changes of availability of quality seats and what that looks like, not only this year and next year, and trying to do some long range modelings of what we think may happen. And again, relying on our community partnerships. In our report, you will see a new list of our partners and how we're working with them. Anything from UC team that is providing students for us to work with in an internship, the Urban Appalachian Coalition, who is helping us do outreach to the community in a new way, and of course, Groundwork Ohio and others. So we'll continue to keep you in the loop with those reports of who our new community partners are, and welcome your suggestion as to who we should partner with to do those better. Thank you, Cheryl, for sending Childhood Food Solutions to us. That was very helpful. Thank you, Bishop Tate, for making sure that we were tapped into the Cincinnati Works information. We appreciate that feedback on a regular basis because we do not want to miss any opportunity. So in looking forward, kind of big picture things of how we look at success in our work a little bit differently, and constantly playing out those scenarios as a staff to keep you updated on what the environment looks like and to make sure that we can deliver on the promise.
Sure. Thank you very much, as usual, for as usual, very thorough update. Are there questions for Chara before we move on to the observers' comments and start heading towards the finish line today?
Father Graham, this is Marcia.
Yeah.
Just a quick question to you, Chara. How aware, you had a bullet in there about helping families as their children transition to kindergarten. How aware are the families of the Cincinnati bill offering for free internet? Do you have a gauge on that? Because I'm hearing that it's under enrolled at the moment.
I will say that we do not have a good gauge, but we committed because our marketing team works with our both sides, the CPP and the CPS marketing team work together. So we committed to once a week doing an additional Facebook post to the parents to make sure that they're aware of that as well, and you will see it on our social media. We also sent direct communication to our providers to let them know they can share that with their families and enrollment as well. We've also been promoting it on our Facebook parent only page, and not this Friday, but I think next Wednesday, I have my dates off of whether it's a email week or a text meet, that parents will also get a text about the availability of that. And our question and communication with providers has been not only is it available, but talk to us if there's struggles accessing it. Because it's not enough just to send out the flyer and say it's available. We've also committed to saying the challenges that we hear from our providers and our families, making sure that we send that directly back to people at CPS so they know what the experience may be in the community and the challenges that people have.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, Chara, Dr. Owens. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. I had a meeting about 3 weeks ago with the president of Duke, and part of that discussion centers around that Duke is about ready to send out the 30-day notice about termination of electricity. And I think there's about 46,000 people on that list. Do you have a sense of, so it means that if they lose electricity, they lose Wi-Fi. And for those parents that you're communicating with email, you're going to lose that ability. You may lose that ability. And we've had some discussion how that may impact what we're trying to do as well.
So not specifically around the energy piece, much more than we did at the beginning of the pandemic. We did send out to parents like the stay and this is how to access resources if that's about to happen. But I think we need to be more deliberate given those numbers. And what we will do is reach out directly to providers and send a message about additional resources that are available. If internet is not the way to go to that, because you're not going to get the communication if your electricity is off and your internet's not hooked up.
Right.
It has to be a word of mouth that we ask our providers to share that with their parents. But what we also may consider doing is a parent targeted mailing that says, if these are the basic needs and resources, this is a way to reach out and be available. What we always hope and what we always encourage parents and providers is if you have the capacity to make a phone call, if you just call into us, we will help solution from there. Right? If you call into metrics, if you call into us any way you can get to us, we don't mind coming out to do in person if you have a challenge. We don't mind communicating with you through phone instead of the internet. So we will look to see how we can address that and maybe get some input from you based on that conversation you had of how we may be able to reach the population that this is occurring to before it's too late and they do have no internet and communication as well.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, this is Vanessa. So I'm challenged by, if there's internet and electricity, but there's no, is there a way for us to gauge, because the district is giving out laptops to their preschoolers and we're not. So if you don't have a laptop, internet and electricity don't really matter. So if is there a way for us to know who had what providers? Can there be a survey? What families even have access? Because it's hard to learn on a phone, and sometimes even phones are not up and running. So I think until we address that nugget, it's kind of it may spin us in circles. And the other thing that comes to mind is Gary. I can't even see who's on. Is Gary on this call? Is Gary?
Yes, I am, Vanessa.
Lingren. Gary. Not Greg, Gary. No.
Yes.
You are Gary? Okay. So a lot of original conversations, Gary used to bring this up all the time about, before it was 8451 and whatever it is now, 92, whatever, is how do we gauge from the provider perspective how those the accountability around how those resources are being used, and that inequity. When I think about what the district has been doing in this time, and even under challenge and having to cut, that inequity continues to stand out for me, because they're giving out packets of work, they're giving out other things, and how are the providers? How are the providers ensuring that the families and the children have those things in this COVID environment? Does that make sense? And you don't have to answer it now. I just think we need to start thinking about that question, because it used to come up a lot and we never came up with a way. You know what I'm talking about, Gary? We never came up with a way to address it. And this, in the back of my mind, as we talk about how we pivot in this environment where children could be effectually learning from home for the next year or two, because we don't know what's going to happen. The numbers look good. I look every day, they're down to 20. But what if something happens like in other cities where kids go back to school and then you send them right back home? How do we know our preschoolers are going to be kindergarten ready, first grade ready, if they're home another year?
Right.
So just something to tackle. Because resources, I guess having to spend those resources differently than laying a new floor, you know what I mean? Improving the actual site of the center, but improving the learning environment of the child.
Right. So thank you for that insight in both. And we will make sure that we do some work to say how that's happening, because some providers are doing a great job of it, and the resources and how we deploy them. I think that we have prioritized maximizing in person. And now it is time for us to think about when that is not a reality and a possibility for many, how we continue on that mission of kindergarten readiness and preparing people in a remote environment.
And people are being allowed to choose. whether they want to come to school or be part of a digital environment. So just kind of, you know, thinking through some of those equity issues in terms of parents' ability to feel safe coming to school, just making sure that we think about the choice of that as well.
We will do it and report back.
Thank
and
you.
actually engage. And I think it may be a good topic for Community Engagement Committee to wrestle.
Oh, thank you, Shara.
You're lovely in that way.
Yeah, from the committee on that.
Oh, thank you.
We can handle it.
I appreciate that exchange. It brings us to the observers' comments on the agenda. As you all saw, perhaps, Greg Landsman had to get off for a 1:30 meeting, but delivered his comments to us via the chat room. So you can go to have a look at that if you didn't see them come in. Vera Brooks is here, though, I believe. So, Vera, do you have anything that you'd like to share with us?
I just want to really recognize Shara and everyone at the table's partnership with us at Cincinnati Public. We had an excellent implementation meeting this morning and very excited about the joint board meeting coming up for us all to continue to move forward and to continue to grow as a city. I do want to also thank especially Ms. Alsop and Dr. Owens for agreeing to continue on with us as representatives for Cincinnati Public. We greatly appreciate you. And I hear what Vanessa is saying about improving learning environments for the individual child. I have my team right now. They are putting together, and we met with Lakeisha, Ely, and Laura Carr. We're meeting every other week. And Thursday, we will be sending her a Google Doc that has our first quarter take-home activities that our teachers have created for families at home that they can use. Also, we will be doing this quarterly. So as my staff is teachers are creating these packets, they're not really packets, they're more engaging activities families can do with their children. We will make sure we share them quarterly with Cincinnati Preschool Promise. So we are getting up and going. It has been a journey, but I have enjoyed the partnership and our weekly talks, or my weekly talks with Shara as we keep moving forward. So thank you to everyone for all your support and all your collaboration.
Vera, thank you very much for those positive comments. With you, we all look forward to that joint board meeting coming up as well. I think it'll be a real positive thing for the levy effort, for example, you know, to see the kind of alignment that we have in common behind this important effort on behalf of our children. That brings us to the end of the agenda. You can see the upcoming meetings now that Leslie's posted in front of us. And so if there's no further business, I'll entertain a motion, please, to adjourn.
I so move.
Thank you very much, Laura. Yes, you're exercising your office. Was that Odell coming in with a second?
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you. All those in favor, please respond by clicking your leave button in the lower right-hand corner of your screen.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.